Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, sponsored by the IBCA. We are a global podcast that shares the passion for the coaching profession. You will hear the stories of coaches from all around the world. We are covering the profession in game, outside of the game, and anything in between. As always, thank you for listening. We look forward to sharing the coaches' stories with you.
Another episode of the After the Timeout podcast. Today, our guest is Greg Neely, head men's basketball coach at Piedmont University. Coach, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So we like to start every episode with what we call the opening tip. Just about your coaching journey, and then a little bit about your program, because we found that every coach is so unique, and it's just kind of fun to hear how people made their way to where they are.
Yeah, so my first coaching job, I was very fortunate. It was actually here at Piedmont. I was a graduate assistant, but at that time, back in like 2007, Division III basketball in the South, a lot of the first assistants were graduate assistants, so they didn't have full-time assistants, right? And so Lee Glenn was the head coach at that time, and he took a chance on me, and I'm forever grateful for that. Coming straight out of college, and gave me his graduate assistant, which was just me and him, right? And so I was able to do that here at Piedmont for 3 years, and then I know we'll talk about it in a little bit. I had to pick up some other duties to make it work, and was able to do that, and then got my first head coaching job up in Indiana, where I'm from originally, and that was at Ancilla College, which is a private junior college. And you go from Division III to junior college. In a lot of ways, those are two polar opposites. And I gained such an increased level of respect for guys that coach junior college, because you got to go out both ways, right? So you're trying to recruit your roster, then you're also trying to place all your guys. And I just had such good respect, or gained even more respect for the junior college level and what that's like. And you're young, you finally get a head coaching opportunity. It's awesome. And then you're out there in a Indiana winter in January, plugging the bus in when you get back at 2 a.m. and a foot of snow and all that. And you realize if you really want to do this or not. And just grateful for that opportunity. Those guys at Ancilla took a chance on me and gave me a chance to be a head coach. And you learn doing that, right? I mean, you're doing the laundry in your apartment, like you're just figuring out how to make it work. You're trying to get sponsorships, you're trying to get guys there, and just survive. And so I was able to be the head coach there for a little stretch, and then got the job as the head coach at Warren Wilson College, and I was only there for 1 year, and we were fortunate to have a good season, and working our way kind of back south. And that was a 4-year institution that at that time was transitioning to the NAIA, and did that for a year. And then they asked me to come back to Piedmont as the head coach, and I've been there for 11 years since. So just very fortunate. You guys know, I mean, just like this connection, right? Like I would have never met you without the game of basketball, and getting a chance to know you and other people, just feel very blessed. And it's humbling to be able to speak with y'all, and I'm just thankful for all the different people I've been able to meet through this great game.
I couldn't agree more. Todd and I, we've been fortunate to talk to people from Europe and Guam and places we would have never thought. So I
Yeah.
completely agree that the game brings us together. As we kind of dig into your story a little bit now, when you took over Piedmont, you inherited a winless team. The previous season, I believe, when I did some research, had been canceled. You were super successful at the school you were at before, so kind of in a way, coach, what kind of made you want to take that challenge? What was that first season like for you, going from that to that?
What an experience, So yes, they had actually canceled the season before at Christmas, which, you hear that sometimes, and maybe you're not as mainstream sports, right? Like maybe that happens in lacrosse or something like that, where you don't have as many players. But men's basketball, like that doesn't happen. You don't think of it. And they had a rash of injuries, discipline issues, a lot of stuff, and just from an administrative level had decided to shut it down at Christmas time. And so I had to finish my season at the previous place. And they had asked to come, and like as coaches, we're fixers, I think, at heart, like a lot of us are, and want to fix things and always trying to fix. And having started my coaching career here and left, and I thought, when we had left, it was in a really good place, and then to see it kind of collapse a little bit, to have a chance to come back and try to fix that and almost start from scratch. And we told people early on, it's like rarely do you get a chance unless you're starting a brand new program yourself to really start from scratch. And that's what we had here. And I had a great athletic director. He told me, you know, in the first year, he's like, your goal, I don't care if you win a game or not, your goal is to finish the season. So you talk about having no pressure, right? Like you don't get many jobs like that either. It's just play all the games. And so we were able to do that. And, you know, we put together a team really late, and it was fun to see those guys. We took a lot of guys that had not been recruited at all, but wanted a chance in college basketball, but we bet on their character. They came in and bought into us as a program, what we were trying to be about. And those guys, you know, by the time they were juniors and seniors, we were pretty good and finishing in the top half of our league, and had really turned that around. And just, you know, to see where it came culturally was a really fun experience too. But, you know, I don't think we do it and take the job if the infrastructure wasn't already in place with good people and good support. We don't have football. Basketball tends to be a bigger thing. It's a smaller community where, you know, basketball can have impact. So those things were in place. And then it was just about people and relationships and trying to get the culture where we wanted it to be. And so, but yeah, it's not very often you can take over a clean slate. And we were able to do that. People recruited, you know, were negatively recruiting us. They said they can't even finish the season. Why would you go there? But we were fortunate to, you know, overcome those things and have a lot of guys take a chance on us. And we're very grateful to them for doing that.
So just as a quick follow-up, I always find it interesting, you know, what do you feel like in that first season there, you kind of learned about yourself as a coach? You know, we all have those seasons where sometimes we learn more about ourselves even than our own team.
So I think you really get challenged. Like, are you going to be a guy or a girl or a female coach, whatever that wants to take shortcuts? Or are you going to really be what you say you're going to be about? Because I think we could have easily said, let's bring in a transfer with some baggage, or let's do this, right? Let's try to quick fix this thing. And for us, when we started, we were like, this is what we're going to be. We're going to be about character. We're going to be about academics. We're going to be about playing the right way. And so that posed some challenges throughout that season, right? I remember one instance for sure. We had a returner player that I did not recruit who came and he, you know, broke team rules, right? Like didn't act right in the classroom. So that was a challenge. He was a starter for us. Like, do I hold true to what I'm going to be about? And I think you get challenged in those things in that situation. And that's what I learned about myself, and that what is most important? Is it, you know, finding whatever way is possible to win a game, or trusting that we can win while doing it the right way and being what we're going to be about? And so I think when you get in those situations where it's us against the world or back against the wall and all those kind of things, you find out what you're truly going to be about. And that was a great learning situation. I think it helped us build confidence in what we're doing and doing it right. And that, you know, if you put a group together, we talk a lot about in our locker room, and I know I'm talking a lot. We talk a lot about it in our locker room, in that, like, that's why basketball is such a great sport, right? Like, I mean, it is not an individual thing. It is a collective group of 5 guys together. And there's only one basketball. And so it's like, if we share that thing better than them, if we're more connected, if we're more together, if we're more disciplined, if we're more prepared, like, we can beat a bunch of individuals. And we had guys that bought into that. And it makes it that much more satisfying and gratifying at the end. But it definitely was a challenge. And, you know, we're very grateful to have seen through that challenge and be where we're at today.
So let's just talk about you talked about how you got to where you were at, but you know, you worked a lot of D1 camps early in your career. You worked 76ers camp, right? And as you were working your way up, you know, obviously learned things right along the way. Looking back at it now, what do you think young coaches should be looking to learn along the way, right? And obviously it's different for everybody, different skill sets, but when you're like, oh, I wish I would have learned that, or I should have done more with that. What are some of those things?
Man, I think it is so easy, and even more so probably now than it was 20 years ago, to not be genuine. I think you've got to hold true to that. Like, I think, you know, so much of trying to connect and network can become fake. And I don't think that's real. Like, I look back on those times and I can think of multiple guys that were in the same spot as me. Like, we go work the same camps. We didn't know each other, right? We end up the same camps. We're trying to break into college basketball. We're scratching and clawing, right? Like, we see each other at Purdue's camp. Then it'd be, oh, you're at Notre Dame's camp too, right? Like, I mean, you're just trying to break in. And I remember filling out my summer calendar, just trying to be like, I can work a camp here this week. I can work camp here this week. And we had a lot of those same guys doing it. And you build those genuine relationships. And then you also see when you're coming up, you're like, man, like, that guy's not really genuine. He's just trying to work the system, and it's not genuine networking and all that kind of stuff. And I've never been a huge networking kind of guy. When I look at those other guys that I came up with, that are some of them at a higher level than me right now, or have won more than I've won, that kind of stuff too. I mean, all those guys were genuine, that did it the right way. And I think you learn going through that process. You're like, man, I like how that guy does it. I want to try to do it that way. Or I don't like how that guy does it, right? Like, it's not all about figuring out what you want to do. It's figuring out what you don't want to do too, or who you don't want to try to emulate. And I think the temptation sometimes is to not be genuine in those things. And I just would encourage all the young coaches, and like, you have a personality, like, be true to yourself. You know what you want to be about, hold true to those things too. And don't let those outside pressures change who you want to be and what you want to be about.
So I was actually trying to write something down that you just said because I thought it was great. Just be yourself. So this is actually something Todd and I were talking about off the air. But it's just and I think you're the perfect person to talk about this in a smaller school, small community, is just where we are in college athletics with the transfer portal and player movement and trying to develop your own roster and all those kinds of things. What do you and your staff or kind of do to kind of maintain your own roster, maintain your own program, maintain your own standards, all those things you talked about, while it's kind of a revolving door? I think Todd had sent me something the other day that the 2,500 women basketball players in college were in the transfer portal. So kind of how do you go about maintaining those standards, maintaining who you are while there's so much movement?
Yeah, you're 100% right, and it's such a challenge. It's trickled down to our level too. I thought a few years ago we were a little immune to it, and now it's just as rampant at our level too. And I think it's put even an added premium on the individual conversations that you try to have with your players as much as possible. I think if you are just going to be a basketball coach, that it's not going to work. You're going to have that door revolving all the time. Like, we've been very fortunate to have very few guys transfer in the last couple of years. I would put us up against any school at our level. And I just think it starts with, and we talk about it a lot, like, it starts at the beginning in that recruiting process. We are not doing a red carpet recruiting process. We are doing a normal average day at Piedmont University. And if you can get excited about that, then anything better than that's going to be great. But I don't think we can sell used cars. I think we have to be genuine. We have to tell the truth up front, so guys know what they're going into, and they're not going to be on campus for 2 weeks and be like, Coach, this is not what I expected, right? Like, they need to know the good, bad, whatever. For us at Piedmont, we are great at basketball. We are great at school. If you want to be in a city, if you want to be in Party Central, it's not going to work. We try to be upfront with that at the beginning. So I think it starts with that initial recruiting process. And then it just goes to trying to build those genuine relationships. And I think the actual basketball coaching has declined slowly every year and how much that is of the job. And so much more of it is trying to build relationships, trying to connect, trying to even connect with not just the player, but the people in that player's network, and just trying to do those things. And then I've kind of learned over the last few years, and it's hard because, I mean, we pour into these guys and then sometimes they want to leave, and that, you can't take it personal. And I think it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, in that just trying to have the best interest of heart of that kid, of that young man for us. I mean, if there's something that can better his family, I mean, for us at the Division III level, if it's a better financial situation for that young man, and I know he's struggling to make this work at Piedmont, if I'm doing this for the right reasons and that situation is presented to him, it's hard for me to be resentful and not support that. And so, but you're right, it's challenging times, and I think it's put an even more premium on relationship building. And I think us as coaches, we just really can't take it personal in the current climate. And we've got to trust that when we get that group in that locker room at the beginning of the year, that we can mold them and coach them the best of our ability, and know that everybody else is going through the same thing.
So you kind of mentioned it here just a second ago, but I guess recruiting in a smaller town, smaller school, obviously D3, we talked about that a little bit. I coached on the girls side of D3, same kind of stuff going on, right? So, how do you go about it then, knowing that's the case? And you talked about your culture and finding people who fit, right? What are you looking for in those recruits, right? What type of player? How are you knowing it's a good fit for you and the program? I mean, I guess you never really know, but you got to take a chance and say, this is a good fit for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, it's an inexact science, right? Like, but I do think we're very fortunate in men's basketball in that there are so many guys that can play. And I think there's so many guys that want an opportunity. We're not like some of the other sports that I think are sometimes can struggle to find enough players that can play at the college level that are good enough. Men's basketball is not the case. And so, I mean, we played Division I Coastal Carolina the first game of the year this year. We're up with a minute to play, right? And couldn't close it at the end. But it's like the gap between them, they're a little taller, a little bigger. that kind of stuff. But it's like the skill gap isn't that large between the different levels. And so, but I think you've got to put the work in. You got to do the diligence, right? I mean, we're sitting in gyms all the time, watching guys play, trying to identify, trying to be picky, and not sacrificing what we're going to be about from a character and academic standpoint, and trusting that we can get guys, pour into them, that they're going to have a good experience, keep them and help them grow. And the stuff we've been talking about, that's become even more challenging. But I don't think that formula is broken yet, because I think there's so many guys out there that can play. I mean, and you guys know, I mean, like today, probably, right? Like we've probably got 15 to 20 emails today from guys that are just like, I just want a chance, coach. Like, just give me a chance, and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's more about sorting through those and figuring out what fits. And then, the margins in college basketball are so thin, right? I mean, the gap between us and the best team in our league and the worst team in our league is a few possessions each night. And so then you get that group and you try to get them to buy in as a collective team and be good at the details and try to figure it out. But no, it's become an increasingly bigger challenge, especially as the cost of higher education has increased too. And there are more options and that kind of stuff. But I do think in men's college basketball, if you work hard enough, if you beat those bushes, if you sit in gyms long enough, you can find guys that can play and fit.
All right, so let's go to halftime adjustments, and I'm going to expand on that same type of thing. But now let's talk about your style of play, right? And what you're trying to do. So I guess you can give us a little bit of insight on that first, but then trying to fit those players into that style of play, because that's always the question, right? It's okay, do we just get good players and figure it out, or are we going to be as a program have to have a style of play that's maybe unique or different, and we're just going to get really, really good at it?
Yeah. So I think at our level, we are not Kentucky, right? So we can go out and basically go pick who they want. I'm seeing all these commitments Kentucky's getting every day, and I'm like, they're choosing who they want. We are trying to get the best available that fits our culture and character. And so that means we might be big at the point guard position. We might have to play a small point guard. We might not have a 5-man and have a bunch of 6'4" wing guys out there. Like, we are trying to get the best guys that fit us. And then we have principles that we're going to play with, right? So this past season, we were a little more offensive, a little less defensive. We were top 10 in the country in scoring, which we've never even sniffed before. But we went more offensive. We were a little smaller, much more dynamic, but that's fit our roster and the guys that we were able to get that were the best basketball players and best locker room fits. So, but we're not going to, we have our non-negotiables, right? Like, we're going to try to share the ball in offense. We're going to play hard. We're going to be super disciplined to our scouting reports and what we're trying to do there. We want to be physical. We're not going to whine with referees. Like, all those things are going to stay constant, even though we have to tweak our style of play. I know we're going to talk about it in a minute. Like, I mean, I grew up in Indiana, and when you were in Indiana, it was Bob Knight, man to man, like, you're going to be physical, all that kind of stuff. And we're played zone defense for the last 5 years, but that's what gave us the best chance to win. That's what made us different. And for us, we talked about the small town and that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, we're not going to get some of the same caliber of athletic bodies and size that some of the other teams we play are going to get. And so we made the choice that we've got to be different in how we want to play. So we use Princeton principles on offense. Now, we don't play slow, but we're doing a lot of point series stuff on offense. And then defensively, we play a ton of zone. And that makes us different than other people we play on our schedule. And we kind of got to the point, if we do the same thing you do and you got bigger, more athletic guys, it's going to be a lot harder for us. And so I think finding a niche when maybe you're not getting the best players or most athletic players all the time is something that's really important, and something that I've learned as I've gained coaching experience.
Todd and I pride ourselves on doing our homework, and I just messaged Todd on the side and I said, here we are, we're going to talk to the coach about his zone. And we just looked, you were 2 points away from being number 3 in the country in offense. So
this is the first time we've been up that high. We've always led the league in defense, and this year we were offensive. That's right.
So before we get into the defense, and we have quite a few questions to break down your defense for our listeners, but why do you think this year, maybe outside of some talent, as you kind of talked about, outside of maybe some offensive talent increase in size differences, why do you think your offense kind of took a step this year?
So we went, I think myself personally, I think early on in my career and even in the more recent years, it's been like, I have been, aired more to the defensive side, right? Like, man, like we got to make sure this guy can really guard. Let's get him on the floor. And our current roster, how it was built after graduation and where we were at, and we had graduated 8 guys the year before. We had a lot of really good offensive guys. So we just said, what is our best 5 offensive players? Let's get them on the floor. And then let's try to teach them the defense, put them in different spots. We had to get a little more creative defensively. And I think that made us really hard to guard. And then we talked a lot about pace. We really pushed. We harped on those principles because we play a lot of zone defense. I think it gives us more time to practice offense practice offense during our practice settings. I think that helped too. And then we led the league in assists. I mean, we really celebrated as a team when we shared the ball. Our guys bought into making the extra pass, and that made a big difference too. So, yeah, I mean, I think those margins can sometimes be thin, and we just went a little more offensive, focused on that a little bit more, pushed the pace, and we were fortunate to shoot it really well from 3 this year too, which I think helped us also.
So in all transparency, as we start to talk about the zone, Todd and I are big zone guys. Todd is a huge matchup zone guy. My team, we are a big amoeba zone team. So you're right there with us. So Todd and I might geek out a little bit during this time with you, Coach. So let's just start from the bottom. Let's talk about maybe we all have an origin story of kind of where we got our zone from. Why we started to do it in the beginning, and then kind of when you first installed it. So kind of just take us through before we break it down, just that origin story.
Yeah, so it was all the years run together now. It's probably 5, 6, maybe even 7 years ago. We were pretty good, but not great, right? Like just middle the upper of our league, and we were a pack line man-to-man team. And man, we were good at it, right? But we didn't turn people over, and we spent so much time on it. I mean, we were closing out, we were helping the helper, we were 5 ball screen coverage. I mean, just all this stuff, and we were good at it. We were spending so much time on it, and it was like our fastball versus everybody else's fastball, and we were a little undersized, so we had to be really good in the gap, and we were just, we were good enough, but we never thought, man, like are we going to be able to be the best team on our schedule playing this? And we thought probably not, right? Like it's going to be hard. We're going to have to be really perfect, and so I literally went into Synergy and just looked at every team that played, more than 50% zone defense. And I was going team by team, and a lot of those teams weren't very good. And we were just kind of going down. I was watching their clips, and I came to Rollins College out of Florida, Division II. And that year they had, I believe, made the Final Four or Elite Eight. They had beaten Alabama Huntsville, who's really good, to I think advance to the Final Four. And they play 100% zone defense. And so we were just kind of watching, and we're like, man, like that's different. And they kind of play like us offensively. And just, so we started watching and diving deep, and then took some of those principles, and that next year kind of started dabbing it a little bit. And we used that, and we were kind of 70 man, 30 zone, and started playing some. And then we saw some things we liked from Rollins, added some things of our own, just through trial and error. And then after that season, we kind of liked it as 30%, and we had graduated some guys. And for the next year, we were like, we're just going to go all in on this thing. 100%. We're going to teach it. We're going to try to get good at it, instead of just being half. And it worked out great for us. We led the league in defense. We led the league in turnovers. We had the guy who led, and I think, and you guys are zone guys like you talked about. I mean, we had a young man who led the league in steals, and we played zone defense. Like, that's not what you think of when you think of zone defense. But we led the league in turnovers and in steals, because we weren't playing a passive zone. We play a more aggressive 2-1-2 zone defense. And so we did that, and then we tweaked some things. We add some pressure to it, and our guys really bought into it, and that's what was really good. Like, they took pride in it. They liked that we were different. Our league plays some back-to-back, so we were really hard on the back end of back-to-back. It allowed us to play more offense in practice. Our scouting reports got simpler. So many reasons that we can dive deeper if we want to. But so yeah, that's how we started, and we have pretty much been 80% plus ever since. And it's kind of become our identity a little bit. Like, I'm probably not talking to you guys without it, which is awesome. And so it's opened some doors for our guys who want to get into coaching, all those kind of things. So, but it's been a good niche for us, and I think it's helped us really stay in some games. And I mentioned, Coastal Carolina earlier this year, the Division I team out of the Sun Belt. I mean, we're not in that game without playing the zone defense, and it gave us a chance to win a game. And so it's been good for us, and it really become part of our identity.
So before I get to the next question, I'm going to follow here. So you talked about, it frees up more time for offense and this and that, right? And coaches are probably like, because everybody's like, I'm not going zone, right? But like, so just in a typical practice, right? Because I've been talking with John with this a lot. Like, you watch the state championship games, and they're like 46-43. Everybody plays really good defense, right? But yes, defense wins championships, but you have to score to win a championship, right? Like it's not as much anymore. So how much time did it actually free up for you to work on some of those other things and get good offensively?
It is not even close. I mean, it is like we would go after with the initial install, and we're doing it. I mean, we would go maybe work on the zone once every 3 days. Man to man, we were going half the practice at a minimum every day. Once we get it installed, and then the scouting is the other thing too, right? Like I've really come to learn. I feel like there's only a set number of actions that people run against zone defense. Now they'll disguise them different ways. They'll start them different ways, but it all ends up being a lot of the same stuff, right? Let's screen the middle guy. Let's ball screen. Let's throw a lob. Let's flare. Well, but there's certain things. And so what I really liked about it too is that I might not know what you're working on for our zone, right? But probably by the first media timeout, I've seen what you worked on. We can adjust. Now, what do you have next? I mean, I don't know of any coach in the country that works on their zone offense before their man-to-man offense. And so our guys have liked that part of it too, and it's kind of on us to adjust. But back to the practice part, I mean, once we're installed, we might work on something specific in a 5 to 10 minute segment. We might play a little live against a certain action, but there will be days where we don't touch it at all, and we're just doing offense and practice, shooting, whatever that might be. I think it's lessened our total practice times later in the year too, which keeps our guys fresher and more mentally engaged. But I don't know if I think I probably underestimated how much it would impact our practice when we initially did it. And you're right on. Like it's made a big difference in us being able to do more offense and more shooting in practice. And we talked about the offensive part, and we shot the ball as well as we ever have because we shot a lot more in practice because we had time to do that. I think it impacts that side too.
All right, so let's go one more. We're gonna get all the questions out of the way, right? The counters to zone. Well, how do you ever work on your man offense if you're playing zone? So what do you guys do to kind of replicate other teams? I mean, obviously most zones are based off man-to-man principles at some point somewhere. But, just kind of that finding that balance too. And you said you don't work on your zone a ton, but you gotta be able to look at it.
Y'all got these questions before. So yeah, these are the same questions I get. Y'all know as zone guys, these are the questions that always come up. So it's twofold, right? I think the downside is kind of what you described. Like you're not great man-to-man defense. So you're not going to go against great man-to-man defense every day in practice, right? Because you're not practicing every day. You're not good at it. But the flip of that, I think the positive side is that it's much easier to morph your man-to-man defense and what you want to see out of a scout team because they don't have set habits ingrained in how we play man-to-man. I want a hard hedge today. I can teach it to that scout team in 5 minutes. They don't have all these other habits. They're going to be able to figure it out. We want to pack in the paint. We can do that. We want to deny everything. They can do that. They don't have all these other habits. And this is how we play man-to-man. I always worried about that as a man-to-man coach. I'm like, man, we have these habits. Now I'm going to ask these guys to go do something else to be the scout team. I don't have to worry about that now. We can go into that game and be like, man, they're going to hard hedge us. All right, let's teach these guys hard hedge real quick, and we can at least get a look at that. And so I know that's a common hesitation, but I have not found that to be a negative thing at all with the zone defense.
All right, so now let's get into the meat and potatoes here. This is kind of we'll stretch this question out here. We'll go piece by piece. So what are the basic tenets of your zone? Like your rules, what you're trying to get done?
Yeah, so we are an extended 2-1-2 zone. So if you picture it in your head, you take a traditional 2-3, and we're going to keep the forwards. So those are the guys on the outside of the 2-3 that are closer to the blocks. They're going to stay in that block area. The center, the middle of the 2-3, he's our 1 in the 2-1-2. He's going to slide up 15 feet ball and rim. He's going to be heels above the free throw line if the ball's walking down the court, right? And they're going to action. Then our two guys at the top are going to be at the volleyball line, if you imagine that on the court, a little bit wider. And so it's extended 2-1-2. And from that initial alignment, the core principle starts in that center position. He's got the simplest job, but also the most important. He is going to always stay 15 feet between ball and rim, arms wide, making sure there is never a direct line drive or pass straight to the basket. And that's a really important point for us. Like if he gets off center, now there's direct line passes under the rim. Maybe they can drive it or whatever. And so you imagine whoever plays that center position, and I'm calling it center, but like we played a 6'2" guy this year, right? It doesn't have to be your traditional offensive center. That's just kind of how we categorize the position. So that 1 in the 2-1-2, you imagine him low and wide, always 15 feet between ball and rim. So that's why we're making sure there is no direct line pass to the basket. Anything they're going to throw is going to have to be up towards the rim, which is going to have to be a lob that will go a swarm is what we call it at the basket. So that's that initial key component. Then our two guys on top, for them, their biggest thing is making sure any pass to the wing goes over their head. We do not want any straight line passes from top to wing. And then when the ball gets on the wing and towards the corner, we look a little more traditional 2-3. And so it's kind of a mix between the buzz defense, if you've seen that a little bit, and a traditional 2-3. So in alignment, it's an extended 2-1-2. The pass from top to wing needs to go over our head. And then our center position is higher up, 15 feet between ball and rim, arms wide. And so we're more aggressive. And so we get some of those deflections up top. And then we can talk more if the ball gets inside 3-point line, all that kind of stuff. But that's the initial alignment that we work with.
All right. So you talked about taking away those straight line passes, straight line drives. But like, what other specific things you looking to take away? Your zone thinking, okay, we're gonna eliminate shooters, we're gonna eliminate bigs, you're gonna teams rebounding, whatever it may be. Like, what are your, like, if this happens in a game, coach is going nuts because we're not supposed to do that, right?
So two things. I think the first, what you talked about, 3-point shooting. So we have aggressive closeouts. We are closing out one step past the shot. We don't stop short on anything. We want to try to challenge contested twos. And so when that, any closeout of the 3-point line, unless it's a non-shooter, and we get into scouting, like we don't do much. We do a couple calls, and who are the non-shooters? We might stop short on those guys, but everybody else we're running past. And I think the big thing that makes our zone unique is what we do when the ball gets inside the 3-point line. So when the ball gets inside the 3-point line, our guards do not go inside the 3-point line. They are defending the 3-point line. And that's where we get a lot of our turnovers. That's why we stop a lot of the three-point attempts. So whether the ball is driven or passed inside the 3-point line, our guards do not go inside the 3-point line. The two guys on top are doing what we call peel outs. And they peel out and try to get in those passing lanes to take away the obvious kickouts, that kind of stuff. So you think about zone offense, right? Like, people are trying to hit the high post. They look under, and then they look out, right? And they're trying to kick out for three, suck you in and kick out. So for our guards, we're not getting sucked in. And that's the hardest thing for our guys when we install this, is they want to get in there and dig at it, right? Or swipe at it, or get in there and help protect the elbows or whatever. We don't want to do that. We want to pressure that catch or that penetration inside the 3-point line, and we have our guards peeling out. And we work a lot on reading the shoulders when it goes in there, which side they go to based on which side they drive it, all that kind of stuff. And that's really the secret sauce of what we're trying to do, is get those guards to peel out. And then we have our other two guys, our forwards that are at the blocks. They slice back towards the basket and they protect the rim. They handle any dump offs, any lobs, all that kind of stuff. And so that's what makes our zone defense unique. And that's what's caused a lot of those turnovers.
All right. So then let's talk about like the actions, right? Like what kind of gives you trouble? What is, something that you guys have a tough time against, right? Because obviously teams now know, hey, they're going to run zone. So they probably come up with some things. And then you talked about that process, right? You're not working on a ton in practice. So now when you're sitting with your coaches, you said after, the media timeout, you're like, okay, this is what they're doing. They're doing something new. How are you going to go about countering that? And like, how do you get that from your coaches to your players?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge for our zone is rebounding the ball. And that's a lot of zones too. But you think about our zone, I talked about how the center, who a lot of times is your biggest player, but not always, he's always 15 feet ball and rim. So if you imagine a jump shot coming, I mean, he's not like a traditional 2-3 more towards the charge circle. He's 15 feet from ball and basket. So he's not in a great position to check somebody out. And so we work a lot with that guy, is just run to the front of the rim and go get it. And so the rebounding can be a challenge sometimes. Now, the flip of that is we're in great position to play transition offense. Like I talked about, when the ball gets inside the arc, our guards are defending the arc and not going inside the 3-point line. So they're in a great position. We get the rebound to leak out, run out, and go in transition. So it's a give and take a little bit, where we're maybe giving some up on the glass, but able to push harder in transition. The actions, like you talked about, I mean, we really, early on when we're installing, we'll talk about what we're going to do, ball screen to an overload, right? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about traditional 3-around-2 zone offense. We'll talk about 1-4 high. Like, we'll do some of these things in practice as we're installing. And like we talked about before, I think there's a finite number of things people do against zone. I mean, we haven't seen anything super, super creative. We got a lot of good coaches in our league that run a lot of good actions. And they've challenged and pushed us to be great at our zone, especially when now they've seen it 3-4 years in a row. But none of it's, something crazy outside the box, right? It's just stuff that we have to adjust our personnel to a little bit. Like an example would be the ball screen to overload, right? So for us, if they're going to overload the backside and set a side ball screen, well, because our guards are up so high already, we're just going to ice it like a man-to-man ice, keep it on the side. And so now they can't get to that overloaded action. And that's an easy adjustment we can make. If they're going to try to bully us on the blocks down low, like we can kind of drop a guy a little bit. I mean, we just have these super simple adjustments that we can do. Film's been really good for us teaching our guys the zone too. And then for other coaches that have tried to install it, I always tell them when you initially install, like, don't tell the offense what to do. Give the zone some confidence. Let the offense tell them to do whatever they want to do. And against a different funky zone, like they're going to throw it all over the place, create make steals, shoot bad shots, do all that kind of stuff. I think that creates confidence in the zone when you're doing it initially. And so that's been good when our new guys get here and doing that. But yeah, I think the more our guys get experience, like they teach us things. We have a couple guys that are really good at back tapping, and we let them do that. And man, in Indiana, growing up there, like you don't do that at all. Like, you play solid man-to-man defense. And we got guys that have been good at back tapping, guys that are good at leaking out on shots. I mean, some of that stuff, they kind of get their own individual niche at what they're good at. And that's been fun to see in the zone too.
So you're saying this episode's not going to go great in Indiana?
Hey, we got some Indiana coaches reach out. Yeah, we've got some Indiana coaches reach out that are doing it now, but it is not traditional Bob Knight basketball. That is for sure.
So we always find it interesting to now ask coaches, okay, so how do you assess yourself? Besides, and the obvious ones are always, points per game allowed and wins and et cetera, et cetera. But how do you measure the success? You go in the locker room, maybe you lost by 2, but maybe part of you feels like you did play the matchup well. Yeah. Are there specific analytics you use or numbers or just, what you see? Kind of, how do you base the success?
Yeah. So we're not super analytic. We are a points per possession, kind of looking at that and where we want to be and kind of how that ranks. We look at rebounding percentages. We look at that too to see. But some of it's kind of a feel, which I know is not the right answer in the current analytic climate. But when you do it long enough, like you just kind of have a feel, right? Like, are we getting torched here? Which we don't feel that really that often. It's just more like, man, like we're flying around. We've got them off balance, like it's working. I mean, some of it's kind of a vibe and a feel on where we're playing. Do we have them off balance? Sometimes guys make shots, right? Like you play good defense and guys hit tough shots. And so we talk a lot about shot quality and what kind of shots they're getting and are we keeping them off the free throw line? We do the traditional defense. We still call them defensive kills. We're probably gonna get away from that term now, but like I know people do that, turkeys, whatever they kind of call them. We do track that just because we do a lot of our practice drills based around those 3 stops in a row to get out, 3 stops in a row. Like, so I'm trying to build that momentum. So we do track those. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it for us, having done this for now 4 or 5 years in a row, it is a vibe kind of thing. Like, man, like it's been good tonight. Like we're flying around, we're active, we're getting deflections. Our guys have some bounce. We're competing on the glass. And then there's some other games that get sprinkled in there. It's like, man, we're just looking a little flat. Like we're slow to move to stuff. We're getting hit on screens when they try to screen us. And so, and we can't play this zone flat. Like you got to have some bounce. You're flying around. You're covering more ground than a traditional 2-3 zone. And so you got to have some bounce and some juice, and you got to be flying around.
So let's go a little bit deeper here. The analytics,
Yeah.
like where people shoot from, and you're looking at, like, if you, I don't know if you look at that. I look at that a lot. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You look at the heat map and you're like, oh, okay, well, something's going on there, right? We can't get them in. So like, how do you guys like adjust for that? Like, so you talk about your closeouts running them off the 3-point line. Well, are you getting as maybe a little bit more specific as, well, they want to go left or they want to go right, and forcing them to a hand out of that closeout, or trying to maybe shading your coverage to somebody who, I looked at that heat chart and they're going to sit over there. And if I let them over there, they're going to bang it down,
No, that's a good point. And so for us, we try to keep them off the baseline. So we're trying to funnel a lot middle if they want to put it on the floor or pass. And so a lot of our closeouts are dictated that way. But you really get a feel, you talk about the heat maps and looking at those kind of things on how people are trying to attack us. We played somebody a couple of years ago who took like less than 10 twos the entire game. Like their goal was to take as long as it took, put 5 guys outside the arc and shoot a 3. Who we played in our conference tournament this past year, I mean, they were trying to bully us inside and put almost 3, sometimes 4 guys around the rim. And so I think that helps really give us a feel from an analytics standpoint on how people are wanting to attack that zone, attack our zone, and be able to make those adjustments there. But we'll do some things even with our own players too. If we see, hey, they're trying to attack more on the right side, which a lot of people tend to do, right? So we can tailor which of our defenders we want on that side. And then our zone, what I like about this zone too, is that it allows us easy to double guys if we want to, because we're kind of, of our positioning and how extended we are. We can trap some if we want to, because those guys are already extended. When the ball goes to the wing, we have our forward come up for a second, and it's not a traditional bump where we have a verbal call. It's literally a second show a hand and back. If we wait on the bump call, we're too late. But we could say, hey, this guy's really good. Like he said, a 3 from the spot. Like, let's trap this guy every time he gets it there. So instead of bumping him down, for lack of a better word, forward's going to stay, guard's going to chase, and we've got him trapped right there. And so just some of those things that we look at and see, especially when we've placed the team a second and third time, just having those, making those adjustments like you talked about, I think are important for us. When the ball goes to the wing, we might sink a guard in to help in the high post a little bit, which is a little bit counter to some of our rules. But if somebody's really trying to attack the free throw line area, we can sneak them in there. Just some of those things. It's interesting always to see the difference between our non-conference schedule, where people maybe play us once a year or haven't played us in a couple of years and play us, against our conference schedule. We play people 2-3 times a season. It's such a big difference, even in those players. And we played some seniors this year that played against our zone like 10, 11 times in their career. It doesn't maybe have that same impact as the first time around. And so that forces us to make some adjustments and be on our toes and do some different things. But we like to trap out of it. We even do some zone man in the same possession. We mix some of that stuff in, just really trying to keep people on their toes.
Now he's talking my stuff.
Well,
yes, sir.
Just giving them every look possible. Some zone the man, some all kinds of stuff. Traps.
That's right.
Well, it's interesting because now on the flip side, just because I run so much zone and see things people do to us, I'm just curious about a couple specific actions,
Yeah.
and kind of things you may have seen this, you may have not seen this, but I'm just thinking of things against your zone that I would try to do. And has anybody ever done like two high posts and tried to overwhelm
Yes.
that person? Maybe what would you do against that look?
Yeah, so if they go too high posts, we'll push the forward guys up, right? Like, so a lot of times when people go too high posts, they won't have one also on the block, right? Like it's going to be maybe in the corners or the wings. And so we will push up the forward guys, the guys kind of starting just above the block. We'll push them all the way up towards the elbows, and they can almost 3/4 those guys. And then I always like to, if somebody, to kind of counter that, let's say somebody goes 1-4 flat, right? Which you would think that would be a way to go. But we're just going to trap them up top. I mean, we're going to trap. They got 1 point guard. Everybody's flat. We got 2 up. We're just going to trap them and not let them get to action, and do those things. But we do see a lot of the maybe 1-4 across high, and then we'll just bring those forwards all the way up, push them up, and almost get them up to the elbow. So now ours looks more like a 2-3, but the 3 are across the free throw line as opposed to being down under the basket.
It was interesting. The other look I kind of thought about, and you kind of hit on it there, but I wanted to expand a little bit more, is I was thinking somebody, and I've had this done to me, is 2 high posts and then the other 2 in the corner. And I know, I know you kind of talked about the 1-4 flat and trapping, but if somebody kind of does almost like a bottom overload with 2 high posts and 2 in the corner, I would just be curious with those 3, what I guess what you're giving up and kind of what you're, I don't want to say okay with, but okay with.
So imagine what you're saying, right? So they've got 2 at the elbows, 2 in the corners.
Yep.
I am going to push up the forwards behind the guys at the elbows, right? Because we're so extended up top, it's a really long pass. It's going to be over us to go from the point all the way to that corner. And if that pass is long and over our head like it's supposed to, even though my forward is up by the elbows, he will be able to get there and play that ball. And so we're going to get those guys up, and just them being up gives the look of, man, that's a hard pass to the elbow, right? Because it's a little more congested. We've got those forwards up. But if they do hit that elbow, so let's imagine we're looking at the court. He hits the left elbow. So a lot of people are going to take the guy at the right elbow, slice him in front of the rim, and then have the opposite wing in that corner. And so our center position, and that forward, our center is going to play the ball on the catch. He's getting the ball inside the 3-point line. The opposite forward is going to have to take that right elbow guy diving in front.
Yep.
So then our guard and what we call the peel outs, right? Like he's responsible for guarding the 3-point line. He's the one that's not going all the way to the guy in the corner, but he's trying to get in that passing lane. So he can either be there on the catch or make it over his head. And those are the things we have to rep. And that's a tougher action for us, but it's one that we've seen enough now where we know, like on that elbow catch, if they get it there, he's peeling out, and then our other guard, and we read the shoulder. So we kind of look on that shoulders. If he's turning and looking to that right corner that we talked about, we're going to chase it farther. If he's looking left corner, we're going to stay more at the top of the key and be able to chase that. And we're kind of moving as he moves his shoulders. But man, I can tell y'all have seen some zone, because that's a really good action and one of the tougher ones for us to guard for sure.
All right, we'll get to the next question eventually, I promise. Let's go blobs now. All right.
Oh yeah.
Let's go blobs, because I've been campaigning to go zone on blobs, just because I think you can eliminate just about everything. You can put a ball to one side. And I was just looking at some stats, and like we didn't happen to be very good at man blobs this year.
Yeah.
And I think it was something like 40 points you could get back if you went by your, man-to-man percentages, right? Because we were pretty good man-to-man. So what do you guys do in blob situations? What are you guys looking to do?
We've been fortunate to be top half of our league, top 3 actually in baseline out of bounds defense, and we zone them all. And we put the forward position, like I'm talking about, the guy would be on the block. We put him on the ball, angled to help take away the basket, but he's aggressive facing it, arms jump, like all that stuff, right? Really active. And then we will put the center on the ball side block, the quote center position, the opposite forward at the back block. And then the opposite guard kind of takes the middle of the lane. The ball side guard is hanging out at the elbow, but he has got to be close enough to any pass if somebody goes corner or whatever. Like he's going to be close to that one pass to the corner. So if they start one in the corner, he's going to be close enough to be there. So we do not want a one pass shot, and we will trap the ball side corner. And so if you imagine the forwards all on the inbounder, they throw it to the ball side corner. He's going to chase that. The guard's going to chase it. We're going to try to trap it and bring the other guard across to try to shoot the gap. And so we will live with them throwing back to half court. Like we're not going to go chase that one. And really in baseline out of bounds prep, we just talk about the alignment. And what I spend the most time talking about is who has got back block and who has got back corner. Because that's, I think, the toughest thing for us to kind of cover. And so we'll kind of talk about where do I want the opposite guard? Do I want him to go chase corner? Who's got that back block, back corner? But once we get that figured out, I can count on less than 5 times that we've ever been beat on the ball side. It's normally, if we're going to get beat, it's going to be a mess up on the backside, which is tough. And it's not a layup. And that's what, I don't want to give up layups on baseline out of bounds.
Coach, just a real quick follow up to that, just because this is something we experience a lot of the time. Do you feel like yes, you're in your zone, but essentially when you are able to scout it through, do you feel like you're essentially able to quote unquote play man to man because you know the action that is coming? The opponent thinks it's a zone, but because you know the action, like you said, like with ours, I can straight up tell my backside guard, yes, this is where you're standing in the zone, but I'm telling you, you're going to have the person in the opposite corner. So just understand that.
Yes, you're 100% right. It's almost like a switching man to man. That's what it comes down to. I tell them in the baseline out of bounds, like you do not need to guard air, right? Like we are not defending air. And so if you feel like you're defending air, go find a body, go help a teammate, go find a body. We are not defending air on baseline out of bounds. So it looks like a switching man to man. That's what it comes down to. You're right. You're going to have this guy slice into the back block. You're going to have this guy go into the back corner. And then if the ball gets in bounds, we're right in the man-to-man look. If they throw it to that same side corner, we're going to trap it and give it a look and see if we can steal one. So yeah, no doubt.
All right, so let's go like future here. What are you kind of looking to do next with the zone? Like add to it, or again, right? Teams start to figure it out, right? Just like anything, right? The Miami Heat were running zone; they still run pretty well, but like teams started to figure it out, and you do something for long enough. And then you start beating them, right? Especially if you start beating them. Now they're going to be like, well, we got to figure this out. We got to come up with something. So what do you like? What are some of your thoughts on your zone, how it's going to morph?
So we've been tinkering, right? Like, so we've always been a 2-2-1 or 2-2-1 press back to a 2-1-2 zone. It makes sense, right? Like the two guys on top of the 2-2-1 are the top of the 2-1-2. The middle two guys will fall all the way back to the bottom of the 2-1-2. And then the one stays the one, right? 2-2-1-1 stays the one. So we've been trying to figure out, like, can we be a little more aggressive pressing? How can we diamond back into it? Can we give some different looks? We've messed with like extending the 2-1-2, same principles, but making it more like a 3-2. So let's put the one all the way outside the 3-point line and get us bigger and wider. Let's try that. We've messed with trapping the drive more, right? Like, how can we just have the guard come chase him and trap the drive? Yeah, just tinkering with smaller things like that. When I initially put it in, I'm like, man, we're gonna have this zone, and we're gonna have like your elementary school 2-3 zone, right? Like, and I'm just gonna go be able to do that to kind of mess with people and do it. That was a big challenge for our guys to be able to turn off and on the principles. So I didn't love that. So then I'm like, well, maybe we just need to do, instead of a elementary 2-3 zone, maybe we can do a 1-3-1 or something that's totally different than what we're doing. Just if we want to mix it up a possession or two, out of timeout, just give people a different look. I even tinkered with a like a diamond in one kind of look out of it instead, right? So just trying to get different, and not that we're going to change the core of what we're about, but an out of timeout look, foul to give look, just that kind of stuff, just to give us some different options. But I do want to explore some different things pressing wise that we can still fall back into in the full court, because we've always been just 2-2-1, which has become a little too vanilla for us, I think.
Hey, before we move to the last two segments, Todd, I think Coach figured out why we had him on now so far.
Yeah.
Man, y'all giving me some ideas too. I appreciate it. This is good stuff.
All right. So as we move into the last two segments, the first one we called 30-second timeout. It's your opportunity to take a second and talk about whatever you want, yourself, your family, your program, where you're from, something that's important to you. You could turn the tables and ask Todd and I a question as we kind of tell all of our guests, there's no referee in your timeout, telling you that your 30 seconds is up. So kind of your dime, your dance floor, the floor is yours.
Well, you guys hit it earlier, but I just want to encourage all the coaches out there, especially the younger coaches. It is a challenging time, I think, to be a coach. I mean, you guys, what you're dealing with too. I mean, at least we get to pick some players, right? Like, I mean, you're a lot of times at the high school level, you get what you get, right? And you're trying to work with that. And I just really want to encourage all the coaches out there, like, to hold true to why you got into doing this. I think most all of us got into it to impact young people, right? Like, I mean, I was an accounting major in college doing tax accounting. Right. And then I was just like, man, like, I really want to try to impact people, and basketball is a tool to do that. So I would just encourage, we talked about the transferring, we talked about trying to break in and all this kind of stuff. And just, don't forget your why and why you're doing what you're trying to do. It's the old Billy Graham quote where he talked about, a coach will impact more people in a year than a lot of people do their entire lifetime. And it's humbling when you think of that. And so I would just encourage all the younger coaches, especially, to not forget their why and why they're trying to do it, to impact young people and be an example and help them be better in life. And it sounds corny, but I think that's the truth. And I would just encourage all the young coaches to stay the course and remember why they got into coaching.
All right, so let's go quick hitters. This is where it just gets goofy, right? Or sometimes goes off the rails. But all right, so we found out you coach tennis. Who's your favorite tennis player?
Coached tennis 1 year. I was a Pete Sampras guy growing up.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. Not a lot of emotion, did his job, got it done, and was really good. So Pete Sampras growing up.
All right. I know you talked about Rollins College in their zone, but is there another team out there? It could be a big college, small college, high school, pro, that you just like their zone?
I like what Merrimack does. I think they've done a good job. They're easy to find in synergy. They're a little different than us, but they're another team that holds true to zone, have been successful defensively. So I think they've been another good one. In addition to Rollins, that's been fun to follow.
All right, favorite part about living and coaching in the small town?
It's got a high school feel at the college level. I mean, I that's the one thing when I started doing college, I missed, like, the community feel of it. But we have that here, and that's been really cool to see people in town that come to games. Their kids come to camp. We're not in a big community. It's got a family feel, and I appreciate that very much.
All right. So summer's approaching. You're in Georgia. What's something you love to do in the summer in the hot weather?
Before I came in to talk to you guys, I was outside with my kids. We were shooting Nerf guns. My daughter's playing softball, all that kind of stuff. So just love, you guys have the same thing, the amount of time commitment we have, coaching and doing that. So any free moment I get to play with my kids and be with my wife, is what it's all about.
All right. Favorite pizza topping. What are you putting on the pizza?
Man, I feel like we're sponsored by Papa John's as much as we eat pizza after games. I tell you what, that's what it is. But I am a pepperoni guy, plain and simple. That's right, pepperoni.
All right, and last one, maybe a next goal for you in coaching.
Man, I feel very blessed to be able to coach, and I don't know if there's next goals other than just continuing what I talked about kind of in the timeout, like not losing sight of what this is supposed to be when everything on the outside is getting a little crazier. Just trying not to lose that feel that I know all of us as coaches, it's really hard to replicate anywhere else in life, and that's being in the locker room with a bunch of other guys that come from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic background, all that kind of stuff, right? Like different races, all those things. But for one common goal, sharing this game of basketball, I just don't want to lose that. And if we can keep that, this sport's going to continue to be great, and I'm going to love doing this job. So, and I appreciate you guys, man. This has been awesome.
Coach, we appreciate you. I think one of my favorite things of this episode is just your energy and your positivity in a time where, as you kind of said, coaching is getting more and more difficult. So thank you so much for joining us, and not only spreading the knowledge, but just your positivity and energy was definitely contagious.
Well, thank you guys for all you do and helping spread the game. And I appreciate you guys very much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in partnership with the IBCA. Please be sure to rate us on whatever platform you are listening and give us a 5-star rating. For more show content and updates, please follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout. As always, thank you for listening. Tune in next time for more content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.